Shalom.
I haven't seen him in like forever.
All right. Oh, that's up and running. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
You can leave it open. We got fresh air tonight.
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah, don't
It's nice.
It's nice.
Nice. Look at her.
I
She
love
looks
it.
like a Eskimo.
I know.
Only in Florida does it look like this is cold. Right? But, it is a beautiful October evening.
Oh, yes.
We should be out by the fire pit, but I don't think we're quite ready for that yet.
It's so hot here.
No, not with the fire, but just sitting on the benches.
Yeah.
All right. So we're going to pick up where we left off.
And we need to also start thinking about the next one because I will check if we are very close to it.
It depends how fast we go through it, right? Because tonight's topic, it's alone. We could go through it very quickly. Because the topic that we're going to hit tonight is the topic of wine.
Yay.
Okay, so I know it sounds exciting, but it's not really, because we're dealing with wine in the context of Avodah Zarah, of idolatry. Wine an issue for idolatry. Why? What special relevance does this have? Because we're going to see a number of sections here that deal with wine uniquely compared to other issues. And if you don't understand what the issue is, it's going to really make no sense. All right, so what's wrong with wine, or as it's going to be referred to in this context, yain neshech?
It's most likely used for Avodah Zarah.
Okay, right. So the idea is that there has been some form of libation, right, or other prayer done over the wine, right? So the same way that we make kiddush, right? When we pick up a glass of wine and we say Baruch Atah, and we say, Mekadesh HaShabbat, that God has sanctified Shabbat, we consider that wine to have gained special significance by being used for that blessing, right? We're not the only ones. Idolaters too, except there was an issue where the idolaters would consecrate whole vats of wine, whole bottles of wine. This wine is for this God. This wine will be used to worship that God. Unlike other types of things, there's no mark left on the wine, right? So if an idol worshiper goes, this wine's for my God, and walks away, how do I know whether he made it for his God or not?
So that's why it's there that if you are in a city with a non-Jew, you cannot put a bottle of wine in the table, at least you drink all.
Yes, right. So this becomes a modern issue. How do we use this particular issue in the modern world? And this is something where the conservative movement has been very clear in its reading of the modern world, which is that wine manufacturers and other non-Jews around us are not consecrating bottles of wine to idols. It's just not happening. And so, indeed, the conservative movement says, if you want to share a bottle of wine with a non-Jewish friend, go ahead. That's fine. You don't need to worry that they're secretly going when you go to the bathroom and blessing the bottle in the name of some God. And now you're enjoining them in that worship. Now, if you think you have friends who are doing that, then you can, of course, adjust your behavior. But that's where the issue comes in, and that's where the conservative movement stands up and says, no, this is not happening. If you live in a pure idolatrous country, or a country where idolaters are at least common, then yes, there's a real worry here. But here in the good old US of A, this is not a relevant concern, and therefore we are not concerned.
I had a terrible experience on that. And
somebody actually blessed the...
No, but I went when to the Mahone Madrid. I was 18. Okay, as part of the youth movement, some of us took a year off to go to Israel. 4 months in Jerusalem to study like leadership, and the rest in a kibbutz, traveling around Israel. Nice experience after when you finish high school. And one Friday evening, we decided to go everyone to an Orthodox person. Mm-hmm. So we work. We were in Jerusalem. We work until the hotel, and there is some Orthodox that they open the house for everyone.
They invite people in.
Invite people. us were Jews, of course, without beer, and most of us, with my exception, with no Jews names, okay? Like, and they invite us to the house. We sat everyone in the house in a huge table. We saw that the owner of the house, okay, he was drinking wine,
Right.
but he put the wine not on the table, but on the side. And every time that he was the wine, he took a bottle and put it back there. And someone asked him, why you don't put in the bottle on the table? It's not much easier. And also we like to drink.
Right, we can
We're
share.
18, okay, so we're fine. But, and he said, well, only if we are sure that we drink everything, because you don't put in the table a bottle of wine if there's no juice. And we say, everyone here is a Jew here. He said, well, I don't know all of you.
Right.
So that was a little mean and rude.
A slap in the face.
Exactly,
Yeah.
like really, you invite people to the Shabbat.
Is this really hospitality, right? Have some fun.
Exactly.
And then you say, oh, but maybe.
You call them, you are a goy. Really? Thank you.
No, but not just the goy, but Avodah Zarah, right?
Yeah.
This Kochavim, that you're
Yeah,
worshiping
of
stars. It's one step further and further and further. So
So
yeah,
I still remember every word that he said after so many years.
I've had people come to me that were in conversion classes at Orthodox synagogues, and they would go to volunteer at the Kiddush setup, like many of people here have done. And this was years after she had left that group. She went to help, and so she picked up the tray with all the little cups to go and put it out on the table. And one of the other women started screaming and grabbed the tray and just threw it all in the trash.
Oh.
And it's like, but I'm studying to convert to Judaism, and I'm here on Shabbos helping. What are you worried about? I mean, I didn't secretly say something under my breath to make this worship by Zeus. I mean,
Wow.
so yes, this was an issue. Now, this issue exactly the reason why the rabbis made this decree. And I believe yes. Right? The rabbis made the decree against yain neshek precisely because wine is one of the lubricants of social relationship.
Yeah.
Right? When you sit and you share a bottle of wine, it opens you up to the other person, and it creates a bond, or at least potentially, between you and the other person. And the rabbis knew that that was a big danger. And so they wanted to put up this barrier. But when they were putting up the barrier, they also had to be very clear what was prohibited and what wasn't. And so that's what this Mishnah section is going to be dealing with, is when does the grape become the wine that we have to worry about? At what stage in the processing? And when I've got a bottle out of my sight, when do I have to worry and when do I not have to worry? And so that's what these Mishnayot are going to deal with. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, so we got the ground rules down. 4.8. Michelle, they're all looking at you.
Okay. A wine press containing
Trodden.
trodden,
That means you've been stamping on them.
may be purchased from a non-Jew, even though it was he that lifted the trodden grapes with his hand and put them among the heap.
All right, so here's the issue. We've got a wine press, and everyone knows how a wine press works, maybe?
Yes.
Right, so you've got the big container,
It's disgusting.
and then if you've ever been to Israel, there's like a biblical thing where they show you how the wine presses work, and this was still the way they made wine right up until the modern world. And then you put weights on top, traditionally human beings that are stomping and squishing the wine to come out. If you've ever seen the I Love Lucy episode, it's one of the most famous. And then the juice and goes into another container where you actually end up with the wine, right? Or the juice that's been squeezed. And so these different containers are going to become very important. The question here is, I've got the grapes, they've been crushed. Am I allowed to purchase that wine press? Can I say that wine press is going to be the contents of the wine press?
The contents.
The contents.
If whoever press it are not Jews.
Right,
That's
they're
the
non-Jews, and they even are the ones you put them in, right? So am I allowed to purchase this? And the answer is yes, right? So at this stage, we're not worried that the wine has become tainted by the idolatrous blessing of a non-Jew.
Why not?
Why not? Because it's not wine.
Oh.
It's just grapes.
Okay.
Great.
And the assumption was nobody does a libation with grapes.
Okay.
Right? You don't that they do libations with wine, and this isn't wine yet. Well, again, remember, much of this is working off what is the standard practice among the idolaters. And here the standard practice was, no one is worshiping the grapes themselves. They're using the wine for their worship. Why it is still grape, even crushed grape, it's okay. It hasn't become wine. However,
And the juice does not become yanesek.
yain neshek, yeah.
Wine assumed to have been used as a libation until it descends into the vat.
Right. So the issue is once it's here, and when it's here, it's okay. Once it's been collected as wine, rather than grape crushing liquid, then it's a problem. Right. Once you've got this storage vat of the runoff from the wine press, now we have an issue where, yes, somebody might have whispered their libation blessing for some idol over it, and now I can't drink it. But when it's up here, it's okay. Down here, not okay.
It doesn't make sense because it's still grape juice, even though it's
Right. It hasn't fermented yet.
Yeah.
Yes, it hasn't turned into wine, but it is now the proper form of wine. So it hasn't been changed yet, because otherwise when does the quality become an issue, right? If there's, that's not wine, right? If it doesn't taste good, or if it's only a little fermented, is it 5% alcohol, 10% alcohol? When does it change? And indeed, this is one of the reasons why you can do Kiddush on grape juice. No, you can't. Absolutely. I mean, you can do Kiddush on grape juice. Most of us prefer to use wine, and by wine I don't mean Manischewitz, but you can use non-fermented grape juice for the Kiddush.
Interesting, because I read, and I don't challenge
No,
you.
it's okay.
Not much, but I read exactly the opposite. That's why when you do an Kiddush adults, you cannot use juice, because if you use an not kosher, the bracha.
Okay. I don't know where you read that, but that's not true. I'm trying to come up with a diplomatic way to say this, because there are some who definitely believe that for Kabbalistic reasons, that you should absolutely only use proper fermented wine, because that is the appropriate form of wine for mystical reasons. But I've never read an opinion that says it's a bracha levatala, that it is a wasted blessing to do the blessing on grape juice. And I have seen, if you can find it, that'd be great, because I have seen many bottles, like I know Kedem, will say on the label, fit for the blessing. Yeah, fit for ritual use, or whatever it says. Yeah,
I never saw it. Where?
Yeah. Like the Kedem, it'll actually say this is fit for the bracha.
I never pay attention to
Yeah.
that.
Well, who looks at the label that closely, right?
Yeah, no.
How much sugar does it have? Is it kosher? Sure, but reading all the different words, no. But if you look, it does say that. So I never heard an opinion that using grape juice was forbidden for doing the bracha. I've definitely heard the opinion that it's not the best, that it's not the ideal form of the mitzvah, that it doesn't have the same mystical component. I've heard all of that, but I've never heard that it was just
because why I know 100% read correctly, because I thought, oh my God, so I was doing incorrectly all these years. Because I have two girls that they like to drink, and I cannot do with wine. So I do with juice, so they can enjoy, and they
learn to love the mitzvah, right?
So I did wrong. I said, you know what? I don't care. My daughter is more important. I will continue doing it.
Well,
anyway,
luckily your intuition was right. And in fact, when people are, for example, alcoholics, this is what they rely on to be able to still do the bracha. And to be able to still enjoy the Kiddush.
Or sick people.
Or sick people as well. Exactly. So, and it should be pointed out again, if you say it has to be alcoholic, what percentage of alcohol? In the ancient world, they used to mix the cup. That means they had wine, but they poured it in, but it wasn't really like wine like we have. It wasn't ready mixed, it was a little heavy. And you put a little bit in your cup, and then you put water in, and then you mixed it up. And some people liked it strong, some people liked it weak. So at what level does it real wine if that's the standard? So they didn't have a way to measure alcoholic content with science like we do. So yeah, it's hard for me to accept that opinion. And certainly I've seen many other pieces of halakha that say clearly no. Once it's in the vat, even if it's not fermented, it counts as wine, good enough for an idol worshiper to make a blessing, good enough for me to make a blessing. All right. However, part 2 tells us,
into the vat, what is in the vat is prohibited, but the remainder is permitted.
all right, so this is, again, going to be a little weird to get our head around, but let me change colors here. So you've got your bottom of the crushed grapes, and it's dripping out into the vat, and it's filling up here. As soon as it goes in, it's prohibited. But even though this is prohibited, this isn't. Okay, Nathaniel, Hannah's here.
So if the grapes,
Sure. Even though what's in the vat, what's in the runoff is prohibited, what is still in the press is permitted, is okay. Even though it's literally the same liquid, it just hasn't come from here down to here. It's just a question of inches maybe. This is still okay because this is pressing, and this is not okay because it's wine.
and what happens if the idolaters are praising when they are crashing.
Right. So again,
they're crashing, and they say, "Oh, here I have all this under my feet,
Right.
all the wine I can see," and start doing the blessing.
so the same way that we had to make assumptions about what an idol worshiper would or wouldn't do to his idol, and what counts as annulling it and doesn't count as annulling it, so too we're making assumptions of when even an idol worshiper would label this as something that was worthy of a libation, of a prayer for their God. And so our assumption is, while they're still stepping on it, once it's out, yes. And that may not always be 100% factually true. There could be idol worshipers that wait until this has already turned into beautiful wine 10 years down the road before they will say a blessing. But we're putting our line right here. And there may be some weird idolater that we don't know about who does this when we don't know, because it's not considered to be valid wine because it's still in the production process here. We're not going to concern ourselves with that weird outlying case. We draw our line right there.
Unless we know.
Well, I mean, if we see the guy making a blessing over it, then yeah, we've got a problem.
Is it still? Kerem still does the same way with people stepping?
I don't think so. No, they use machines. They use machines.
Yeah.
If they did it with feet, it wouldn't be that cheap. All right. 4-9. Now we're going to do a little collaboration, working together.
A Jew may shred the wine presses together with a non-Jew, but may not pick.
All right. What's going on here? All right. So
It's the same idea of the mixed business.
um,
You have a partner that is not Jew, so you can have more flexibility.
not exactly. No. This is trying to figure out, when does my action contribute to the final outcome? And at what stage does what I'm doing make something impure in the chain of construction? And the issue here is that we have the wine press, where if I'm stepping while you're stepping, that's considered okay. But because, again, like I said, the line is here, it doesn't become wine until it comes out. And even though I'm making that happen, I haven't actually involved myself with his wine. I've only involved myself with the press. That makes sense, yes?
Yeah.
Right. But with the grapes is because once a non-Jew has touched the grapes have become ritually impure. Different than the issue of them making a libation over them. You're looking at me confused.
Yes.
Okay, so ancient world, right? In the ancient world where we had the category of tum'ah and tahor, of something that was ritually impure and ritually pure, were considered ritually impure, right? From day one. Right? They're walking down the street, they're ritually impure. My food growing on the tree or the vine is considered ritually null. It's zero because it hasn't been picked yet. So if a caterpillar is crawling across it, if a pig's rubbing up against it, if whatever, it doesn't matter. It can't be made ritually impure while it's growing, while it's alive. Once I pick it, and once it becomes moist in particular, then it can become ritually impure. So if I pick it and I'm ritually impure, then it's ritually impure. And that's not a great thing, but there are certain ways around it. But there are issues with regarding tithes and truma that I should be ritually pure when gathering these things. To have a non-Jew touch it means automatically it becomes ritually impure. And so I can stomp on grapes together with him because I'm not really doing anything wrong, but picking grapes with him, when he picks the grapes for me, are now ritually impure. And then I can't do tithes, I can't do truma, and all of those things become a problem. Well, that as another level, yes. But even if you weren't planning to use them for kosher wine, it's still a problem.
I was watching a video, it was said the joy of kosher wine. And it was a winery, I believe it was in France, and this lady wanted to do kosher wine. So he brought this to Israeli guys to out and give their opinion. And the guy was trying to explain this Mishnah to them.
Right, of the working, this is what we're going to have to do for the working.
You can't have, he was trying to explain to the guy, you have goyim working in here.
Right.
You cannot have the goyim pick the grapes.
Right.
And this is exactly.
This is where it was.
Where it was. And he was trying to explain to the guy the process and super clean, everything that has to be super clean and super organized. And he was finding all kinds of dirt, on this. So needless to say, he's like, you're not ready to do kosher wine. So it was,
we'll work on this.
They got them upset, but now I totally get it.
Right. And just to make sure that we are being completely fair here, and you can see the parallel, in part 2, we're talking about an Israelite rather than a non-Jew.
Was working in a state of ritual impurity. One may neither tread nor pick with him. They move empty casks of the press and carry them filled with him from the press. All
right, and go ahead and read part 3 because it's basically a parallel but with bread.
If a baker was working in a state of ritual impurity, nor roll dough with him, but we may carry loaves with him to the bakery. Okay,
so if somebody is doing this in a state of ritual impurity, they are essentially creating a transgression. Right? They are sinning. Somebody's sin. So if they're treading, well, they're ritually impure. That means he's committing a transgression. Now, a non-Jew treading is not making a transgression because he doesn't have the commandment. So I can tread with a non-Jew, but I can't tread with a ritually impure Jew. I mean, it sounds weird, but there's more leniency with the non-Jew because he's not bound by the same commandment. But a Jew is bound, and just like I wouldn't help somebody murder, I wouldn't help somebody steal, I'm not going to help somebody commit a transgression against Truma and against the tithing. I have to say no. However, carrying what was already made while he was in a state of ritual impurity, I'm not helping him create a new transgression. I'm just helping him move something that already was a problem.
What is ritual impurity for today?
All of us are ritually impure.
No, that's why I'm asking you, because we don't have moral paraduma.
Yes.
So what is for today, if you want to apply the Mishnah, because also the Mishnah was also after the destruction of the temple. So they had the same problem.
Well, it wasn't. I mean, they still concerned themselves with ritual purity more in the days of the Mishnah than since. But now we are considered to be under a presumption that everybody, from the moment you step out of the mikveh and onto dry land, pure again. You can go into the mikveh, and then as soon as you come out, bam, ritually impure.
So how do you adapt this Mishnah to our days?
Then we don't consider that to be a transgression. We are not in a state where we can keep ritually pure. Therefore, we are not violating by cooking while ritually impure. because there's nothing else to do. We would starve to death.
Yeah, that's
Right.
exactly.
So we still do, all of our cooking, even though we know that we are technically ritually impure. But if we had the ability to become ritually pure, for longer than just the second out of the mikveh, then we would do so. And then we would be reintegrating this into our life. But right now, we don't. Okay, moving on.
It's very similar to the Orthodox. They have this thing, Halav Israel. The same thing.
Halav Yisrael is a different question. And that was one I think didn't we
Halav
touched.
Israel,
Did we cover that before, or was that a different topic we covered? But the Halav Yisrael isn't about purity. The Halav Yisrael is about, did anything get mixed into the wine that came from a non-kosher animal? When I'm buying the bottle of milk and it says cow, can I trust that it says cow? Or do I worry that they used horse and camel or donkey or pig or whatever? And the short answer is that for most of the modern world, Jewish authorities from across the spectrum said as long as there is a government agency that makes inspections and that will hold them accountable with fines in criminal cases, and we have a just legal system, you don't need to worry. If it says cow, it's cow. For people to add other milks in. It's not helping their profit margin to add other milks in. In fact, it's harder to add other milk in than it is to just use cow. So we don't have to worry about that. But recently, in the last 15, 20 years, there have been people who have decided to take on the chumrah of saying, I really, really, really want to make sure that it was coming only from a Jewish source. And, that's fine. They're welcome to take that. But it's exactly. But it is. But it is not an issue of kashrut. It's an issue of their feeling regarding the spiritual act. All right, a little bit more wine on 410.
Was found standing by the side of a vat of wine. If he loaned money to the Jew, then the wine is prohibited.
Go ahead and read part A.
But should he not have loaned money to the Jew?
I.e., but if he hadn't.
If he not have loaned, okay, I'm not right, but then it's permitted.
Okay. Sounds a little weird, right? It actually kind of makes sense. So imagine I loan Natan $50, right? And I'm waiting for Natan to come back to pay me back. And I'm sitting there waiting for him to come back, and in front of me is his box of cookies. I feel, because I've loaned him money, that, kind of... What's that?
Take a cookie as a
Yeah, he owes me a little, right? I have a lien on his property, and his property includes the cookies. So I could take a cookie, and then when he comes back, say, oh, by the way, I had a cookie. Knock $1 off what you owe me. Only give me 49 back. And it would be it might not be a right thing to do, but it would be a normal thing for someone to do. This idolater is standing next to the vat of wine, and I owe him money. And he's sitting next to wine, and I owe him money. He might think, just dip my cup in, have a drink, make a little blessing to my idol, and bam, the whole vat is no longer. But if I don't owe him any money, he wouldn't do that. That's the assumption, that an idolater is not going to stand next to a vat Jew and make a blessing over it if he doesn't feel that he has any claim to that property. If he feels he has a claim, he might do that. But if he doesn't feel he has a claim, he's not going to go around making his idol blessing on every single vat that he comes across. And so even though there's a non-Jew left alone with the vat that contains my wine, I can still trust that the wine has not been rendered forbidden because of idolatry. We see the logic there?
Yeah.
Right.
There is a custom that when you make the blessing, so the kiddush, the wine, you pour wine into glasses or your glass, and then you do the blessing. And before you do this, you have to check on the bottle. Is this the reason?
I'm not familiar with that custom.
That's what I was told. When you do a kiddush,
right? That you do it because
you fill the cup,
right,
and then you turn the
put the cap on, the lid, the cork, or whatever.
Because told by but some reason, I don't know.
Because I really don't want that you will take more wine.
Maybe.
And that's enough. I have to. I'll look that one up, but I've never heard of you have to put the cap before you go ahead.
Before you do the blessing.
Right.
The explanation was that if it's open, the cap is not there, you actually bless the wine in the bottle also.
Okay, I could see that as being an issue, right? Because there is an intention. Am I sanctifying this item for just now,
For the cup.
right? The cup, or am I sanctifying the whole bottle? And now this bottle can only be used for this blessing, and that means I have to finish the bottle tonight. And if I separate the bottle to that with a physical barrier, then it's clearer. But, you know, to be honest, in Jewish law, if your intention is on the bottle, even if there's a cap, it doesn't help, right? If I say, I'm drinking this wine and I'm looking at that bottle thinking Baruch Atah, then it's all linked, right? Whether you put a cap on it or not. And if you didn't put a cap on it, but you're thinking only I'm doing Kiddush with this cup, and this is the only cup that's Kiddush, and anything else I drink tonight is just for dinner, then you don't need to separate. But I hadn't heard that particular custom. But it's an interesting way of highlighting the importance of where are you thinking? What's your intentionality? I wouldn't say that it was prohibited to use if you didn't, but I can see why someone would do that custom as a lesson of understand what you're blessing when you bless. Don't just say the words like you don't understand them. Like you don't care. Exactly. Words and intention matter. We've kind of come across that idea a lot. All right, onward.
You fell into a vat and climbed out, or measured it with a reed, or flicked out a hornet with a reed, or tapped on the top of the frothing cask.
All right, let's make sure we understand what's going on here. All right, so we're talking about the vat here, right? Not the wine press, we're talking about the vat. And you have a non-Jew, and he trips and falls in to the wine, right? He's in your wine, right? And he climbs out and he shakes himself off. Or perhaps he wants to see how deep the wine is, and so he puts in the stick to see how deep the wine is. Or there's a bug on top, and he's flicking it off to get it out of the wine. Or the wine is bubbling, and he's tapping it so the bubbles go down, right? All of those things, does that count as enough contact, as enough time, or the right opportunity for him to make his blessing? That's the issue. Is even though this is not like a person standing there going, da, 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 is this something we're worried about? And the answer is?
All of these things actually happened, and the rabbis said that the wine may be sold, but Rabbi Shimon permits it.
All right, so the halacha basically comes down half and half, right? We're not going to say the Chachamim that you can go ahead and drink it, although Rabbi Shimon says it's fine, because maybe he did, but on the other hand, he probably didn't, because these are behaviors that when people are doing them, they're not usually thinking about making blessings of dedicating this wine to some god. So you can still benefit from it. You can still sell it and gain benefit from it. On the other hand, if somebody says, I bless this bottle for Zeus, you, as a Jew, you're not allowed to sell it even and get money back for it. It's totally gone. It's an idol object now and done. So what the rabbis are doing here is half and half. You can sell it.
Sell it means to non-Jews.
Yes, to a non-Jew. Yes, yeah. If you sold it to a regular Jew, it'd be like selling him an idol. And then that's the concern.
Gross. I wouldn't drink a wine that somebody fell into the.
You're going to waste the wine? You're going to waste it?
I don't know. That's maybe me. But
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, especially back in the day before soap.
So,
But if you work the whole season and your family depending of that money,
Exactly.
You know what? The 3 monkeys.
No, it's not even that. I mean,
no, because you need the money.
yeah, when I'm working on this, my sweat is falling into it all the time. My hair is probably, bits are coming in, bits of skin. And, people used to have wounds and sores, and they didn't have, they had infection. They didn't have a way to fight germs, so they just learned to live with them. We're still alive, yes. So yeah, a person falling into it might not be nice, but it's not a catastrophe, and it's certainly not going to throw it out. So that's why the ruling is what it is. What's that? It's your livelihood. It's parnasa. Yeah, I mean, you need this to survive, either to drink it or to sell it. All right, and then part 3, we're going to just push it one more level of do we think the guy might be making a blessing?
If a non-Jew took a cask and in his anger threw it into the vat, this actually happened, and the rabbis declared it fit for drinking.
All right, so the rabbis in this case said, all right, someone who's throwing around furniture, he's just mad. And so even though he handled it in this little distance, we're not going to worry about it. It's still fine and okay. Make sense?
Yes.
All right, I think we can finish 11 and 12 tonight, and then we're done with chapter 4.
Oh,
All right, so let's hit 11.
if a Jew prepares non-Jew's wine in a state of ritual purity and leaves it in the non-Jew's domain in a house which is open to the public domain, in a city where non-Jews and Jews reside, it is permitted.
All right, this is like getting into one of the more complicated hypotheticals. I'm going to make a little drawing here because we're going to need this city street for a couple different Mishnayot. All right. Remember that.
But those supposed to be depending who has the majority. If the majorities are Jew, that's fine. If not.
Usually you're right, we follow the majority. But here it's just a question of if there are Jews in the city, then this issue is already known and we don't have to be concerned. But so here's what's happening is me, I'll make a little Star of David, and him, right, who's worshiping an idol, I make his wine. So that means it's kosher wine because I'm a Jew and I made it in ritual purity. And I walk over to his courtyard, because remember, that's how most of the people's houses were made. And I leave the bottle of wine. There, it's a bottle of wine. That bottle of wine is now in his zone, but he has not definitely come and picked it up. What is the status of that wine?
Still kosher because the other person never touched it.
The other person never touched it.
Never saw, so they couldn't bless.
But what about a stranger?
Oh, yeah.
That's why the demographics of the city matter. If it's a mixed population city, then we don't worry about it. Then we don't worry that some stranger has walked by and said, oh, mighty, whatever, I bless this bottle of wine in your name. Remember, we were worried about people standing next to vats who might have loaned money. So we had a concern. But here, because it is a mixed population, we're not concerned.
So a few Mishnah before that if someone never say, oh, if someone passed through my system where I got the wine, oh, it's not kosher, people can say something. We say no. Like because we don't expect that if there's not interaction, if it's not something that they will receive some benefit, I know that he will not say anything. The same like that. If someone is walking out in the street and see a bottle of wine, they will say, oh, Zeus bless you. He will not say it, but it's the same idea that we saw before.
I mean that we are allowed to trust it.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. It's the same idea that we are allowed to trust it.
Exactly.
However, next part A.
But should it be in a city where only Jews reside?
Only non-Jews.
If non-Jews reside,
That makes a difference.
prohibited unless a Jew sits and guards.
I'm leaving it here, but I'm like the only Jew in town. Then once I walk away, I have to assume that someone in town did something with it, touched it, handled it, maybe whispered, because everybody in town is non-Jewish. That it's still permitted by the time I leave, or by the time someone else comes along, I've got to stay and watch it.
The question is, why is he still the town?
Right. Well, yes. So let's imagine he's visiting the town to sell the wine. So the question is, how long would it stay ritually pure? And the moment he walks away, it becomes ritually impure, it becomes forbidden. However, very important law of kashrut coming up here.
For the guard to sit and watch the whole time, even if he keeps going out and coming in, it is permitted.
Right, Yosef and Nichnas. If you go out and you come back in, and they don't know what your schedule is, as long as they know there is somebody watching this bottle, and he could come back at any time, then that's considered guarding. And the same thing happens for hashgacha, for supervision. When for example, OU, I believe, certifies like Nabisco. right? Or some of those other companies. They don't have to sit and watch every Oreo being made in order to say that it's kosher. But they do have to make sure the ingredients are kosher, the machines are kosher, and that they have keys to the facilities. And they can show up at any time. And that inspection, that threat of inspection, is enough to make sure that we can trust that the Oreos that come out are kosher. Because they know that if they, cheat, that the guy could show up right then, and then bam, they're in trouble. So that coming and going form of guarding is a very important principle in Jewish law when it comes to kashrut.
Right. Got it.
You can, yes. So again, in kain ein ladavar sof, right? If you don't want to trust anything except the food you grew, then that's where you end up. Right? I mean, once you say, I'm not going to trust the hashgacha of that group because that group might be bribed, or I'm not going to trust the supermarket because how do I know that when they brought the kosher meat off the truck and put it into the supermarket, someone didn't repackage it?
Someone by mistake threw a little milk over this, was drinking a cup of milk, or oops, spilled milk over the meat.
Or, well, actually, cold, we're going to see is not such a big deal. But how do we know the guy didn't come along with a needle and with pig's blood and just put it into the kosher meat? Right? I mean, we can imagine all sorts of things, and you can imagine yourself into sitting alone, eating only what you grew in your garden, because you don't trust anything else. And kashrut actually goes to great lengths to make sure that we do have an avenue of trust for other people. And that's a big, an important principle. And maybe someday we'll study chulin and we'll look into kashrut in more detail. But this is one little slice of where that comes through into this other topic.
Be the next one.
We'll see. I think between Mishnah Torah on kashrut is a better idea than actually hitting the Mishnah. It's going to get us closer to rules rather than the early Mishnah. So it's more productive. Maybe someday we'll get there, but we should have something that gives a different flavor for kashrut for this. All right, let's go ahead and read.
I have a question, Robert.
Yes.
The wine and leaves it in the
Right.
neighbor's yard or house. The whole thing is so he cannot go back and take it and drink it.
Pretty much, or another
Yeah.
Jew couldn't. Right.
Yeah, or another Jew. But
Right.
if the other,
Couldn't. Can in some circumstances, and he
Yeah.
can't in other.
yeah,
So let's
according to
imagine
this,
Right. So let's imagine this is my bottle of wine, and I deliver the wine, and then I walk back home, and then I go,
I want to-
I gave him the wrong bottle to the house, and I'm looking at the bottle. Can I or can I not take it?
You have to read this.
Right. And you have to read this, and you go, oh wait, what's the population of this town? Right. And so that's the issue.
So
That
if it's mixed population, yes, you can do it.
mixed population, yes, you can take it. Put the other bottle that you meant to bring, come and have a nice drink. But if it's an all non-Jewish population, and that means they're all idolaters, then you're out of luck.
Lost.
So what was the question?
That was his question.
Again,
He's talking in the middle.
No, why are we worried about this? What's
yeah,
the
why
situation?
worry about it? Yeah.
All right. And then Rabbi
Makes
Shimon
sense.
says something that's really confusing.
Ben Eliezer says, it is all one with the domain of a non-Jew.
Okay. Really tries to unravel this. We're not going to go down too much of their path, but basically what the issue is here is if you leave it not in the house of the person who's supposed to be buying it, but in the house of someone else, does the status change? Or will someone, if it's in someone else's property, respect it as being the other person's property? And Rabbi Shimon is in a minority here, so we're not going to go down that. Like I said, the Talmud has a hard time sorting out what he's trying to say. So we're going to leave it there for tonight because I really want to finish chapter 4, and Mishnah 12 is going to be much easier to finish up on. All right. Once more, we are buying and we're selling wine to non-Jews.
If a Jew prepares a non-Jew's wine in a state of ritual purity and leaves it in the non-Jew's domain, and the non-Jew writes for him, I have received the money from you, then the wine is permitted.
Okay, so what we're talking about here is a, what do you call it, a receipt,
Okay.
right? That he has written out the receipt, then that means by having written it out, the status of the bottle remains untouched because I've already received the money. That means the bottle is not transferring over. So, for example, let's make sure we have this. My street again. We need another nice Jewish house, right? So this is the winemaker, and this is going to be the buyer, and this is the middle man. So I take the wine, I drop it off at my middleman, who just so happens to be an idolater, and the buyer is going to pick it up from him. Right? So the possibility here is that the middleman may consider it to be his property while it's in his possession. And if it's his property while it's in his possession, then we're worried about yain neshech, that there's this issue of libation. But if he has already given him a receipt saying, yes, I've got your money, I will look after your wine, then that means he knows it's not his property and we don't have to worry about it. Same thing like the guy standing next to the vat, where if you owe him money, then he considers he can treat it like his property, kind of. If you don't owe him money, then he's not going to treat it like his own property.
Right, makes sense.
Make sense? Okay. And then part 2.
If, however, the Jew wished to remove it and the non-Jew refuses to let it go until he paid him, this actually happened in
Beit Shan.
and the rabbis prohibited it.
All right. So if he hasn't given me a receipt yet, and I show up and say, oh, my bottle, but I left my wallet at home. Let me take the bottle home so the family can get dinner going, and I'll come back with the money. And the non-Jew says, nope, you don't get the bottle till you paid me. I can no longer ever get that bottle, because that means he considers it to be his property, which means he's doing whatever he wants with it, and now that means it's off limits. Okay, I know. All right, so we will continue with chapter 5 next week.
Which one, Rabbi?
Brain cells running.